are they? What's taking them so long?
Well, is that shopping cart going to smash into that car? We're going to find out in this particular session, along with how to truly respect the property of others. When we do that, honey, we're placing honor on those outside of self. Same thing, learning about respecting peers and learning about respecting nature. It's all part of the big picture of moral training of our children.
We're also going to get into some practical application and how do your siblings in the home demonstrate respect for one another, because that's usually a big issue in most homes.
We have a lot of practical teaching in this particular session, so why don't we get right to it. Our class is going to join us in a few minutes, and when you're ready, join us also. Good to see you all again. I want to welcome you now to our 8th session of Growing Kids God's Way. And we're going to be talking about respecting peers, respecting property, respecting nature. We're going to continue in this character development series, and actually in this session conclude the series. We probably are going to run a little bit over beyond what we normally do in the lecture because there's so much to talk about. So let's get started right away. Let's direct our attention to the outlines, to respect for siblings and peers. Let me give you a working definition of a peer. When we refer to a peer relationship, we do so from the broadest definition. A peer is one of the same age or dignity. By this definition, your child's peers are those who have common association. Also, brothers and sisters are included in this definition, as well as friends and classmates. Let's continue on and let's talk about how do you show respect to peers? How do you teach your children to be honest with them? How do you teach them to honor their peers? Well, let's begin with some general definitions right out of Scripture, some general thoughts. In Exodus 20, first of all, we have the 10 Commandments. And let me remind you, although we touched on this briefly when we got to honoring your father and mother, and we said that one commandment is associated more with the first 4 commandments than it is with the last 5. But the last 5 of the 10 commandments really regulates our relationship with other people, how we are to treat other people. Philippians 2:3 tells us that we are to esteem and regard others higher. Colossians 3:13 tells us to forbear one another. Romans 12:17 tells us to live honestly before one another. Obviously, in a general sense, all of these verses apply as we live out our lives among those who are our peers, and we're going to teach these truths to our children. Now again, these are general principles, general biblical precepts, but there's one specific command that speaks to our conduct towards our peers, and it's this. You're going to find it in Leviticus 19:8. Listen to these words, follow it on your outline. Moses, in giving the law to the children of Israel, said, "Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against one of your people." But here's the key. "But love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord." The Apostle Paul certainly picked up on this. He said this in Romans 13:7. "Whatever other commandment there may be, all is the key word here, all are summed up in this one rule. Love your neighbor as yourself. In Mark 12:33, Jesus said to love God with all your heart, with all your understanding, and with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. These are more important than all the burnt offerings and all the sacrifice you can bring. Love your neighbor as yourself, love God. May I point out, this is very important, the difference between Greek and Hebrew wisdom. Greek wisdom, much of our audience that we are speaking to is under the influence of Greek philosophy, Greek wisdom. It basically means that wisdom is the accumulation of knowledge. That's how Greeks saw it. Sharpen the mind, and you are considered wise. The more knowledge you have, the wiser you are. Hebrew wisdom was very pragmatic, though. Hebrew wisdom was not as concerned with the amount of knowledge, but what did you do with knowledge? More concerned with application. It's interesting to point out that when the scribe asked Jesus, what is the greatest commandment of them all? Jesus began to recite the Shema. He said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. And then he said, this is the first commandment. But he didn't stop there. He went right on and said, and you should love your neighbor as yourself. The point that Jesus clearly was making, if this vertical is true, if you believe this, then it should show itself this way horizontally. If you really do love God, you're going to love your neighbor. That's an automatic. That is the pragmatic application of truth. And I say that to you because this is one powerful verse, this idea of loving your neighbor as yourself. So what does loving your neighbor look like for your child? Let's look at some of the fundamentals. This is where you're going to take your child. This is where you're going to center some of your parenting. Number one, how about something so basic as this? Do not allow unkind speech between the siblings. Let's start there. No unkind speech. We are really amazed, even in the Christian community, how often we hear rude words come out of the mouth of children against their sibling. Unkind speech. Things such as, Mom, he's such a reject. That is the unkind speech. You parents need to take very seriously what comes out of the mouth of your children. Is it edifying? Scripture tells us that's what it's supposed to be. Why? Because we're supposed to be putting on God, putting on His values, not working against it. Number two, encourage your children to be happy when something good happens to a sibling. When you're playing a board game with the kids, and one of the children roll the right dice and they win, what is the response of the siblings? Do they get upset? Do they say, oh, that's not fair, I want to play again, he cheated? Or do they say, yay, you won, you did a good job? As I think back on the many blessings of our life and the grace of God in our life with our own children, we look at this one statement about encouraging your children to be happy when something good happens to another one. I can't help but think about that night when, it was a Sunday night, we were visiting friends. The next day, all of the junior high youth group was going to go away for camp. And our daughter Jennifer, she really wanted to go, but I was in seminary. We did not have the money for it. And so she filled up her whole week just to be active so that she wouldn't even have to think about it. But the Sunday night before they went, the youth pastor found us. He came over to the house that we're at. He asked me, we have one scholarship. We would like to offer it to Jennifer. Would you mind? And I thought, she'd be so excited. I says, no, go right ahead. It's going to be her decision. So he asked Jennifer in the kitchen. Anne-Marie was there. Amy was there, and another. He said, Jenny, we have a surprise for you. We have one scholarship. We would like you to be the guest at our camp starting tomorrow. Would you like to go? Jennifer's, her face, she beamed, yes. But then she realized, no, I can't go. I can't go. I've made all of these plans all week long. I've taken babysitting jobs. Even for one couple, I promised I would walk their dog every night because they're going to be gone. I can't go. In that moment, Amy stepped in and says, no, Jenny, you go. You go, Jenny. I know you've wanted to go. I'll take all your babysitting. I'll take care of the dog. You go, Jenny. You've been looking forward to this possibility. And Anne-Marie and I, we just stood there, realizing the blessing. All of the words, all of the training, all of that encouragement that we were trying to instill into Amy's heart and Jenny's heart to be happy when something good happens to another person. That's what we're talking about. You know what? You guys cultivate that, but you need to be sensitive to it. One of the things that detracts from that, this is just a little Ezzo pet peeve if I could throw this in here. Ladies and gentlemen, when it's one child's birthday, Celebrate the glory of that day. You do not have to buy gifts for all the other children, so all the other children coming to the party will not feel like their self-esteem is drained because they're not the center of attention. The very fact that one day they will have a birthday and it'll be their special day. Honor your children. It is okay that you don't buy everyone gifts, but buy gifts for the special birthday child. Let me continue. Number 3, teach your children to respect each other's property. Now, we're going to develop this a little bit more in the wrap-up session about how to teach children to share. We're going to talk about respecting the toys. But, early on, teach your children that before they go prancing into a sibling's room, at least a courtesy. Start with this. Have them knock. Have them learn to ask for permission. It's a courtesy. It's a habit. And certainly even in mom and dad's room, our children knew there was a line. If that door was open or closed, there was a line. This is the only room in the house that we asked that you're not allowed to come in without knocking first. Obviously, there were some good reasons for that. But the fact is, it's just a matter of teaching our children respect. Consider that. Let me give you another one, number 4. Teach your children empathy. Well, let me use Jennifer as an illustration of this, another trophy of grace. I remember the day that she came home, and she was sharing with me how they got clobbered in kickball. Both Amy and Jenny had a number of opportunities to be picked as captain. When you're out in the playground and the teacher says, okay, you're captain, and you get to divide up the teams. And you know how the pecking order goes. You take the first good guy, and then you take the second best guy, and then you take the third, and then you take the fourth, and you go down. Jennifer, for whatever reason, that one day, she thought of her little friend Dory. Dory was never picked first. In fact, Dory was always picked last. And Jennifer just had this moment of just compassion because she realized she's never experienced this. So when they started picking sides, and the other guy went first, of course, he picked the best one. Jennifer shocked everyone. She took Dory. And everyone was snickered, and then he immediately capitalized, and I'll take Jim. And so Jim was the second best. Well, Jennifer started going up the list as this guy was going down. I said, well, what happened, Jenny? She said, Dad, it was terrible. We never even got up to kick the ball because it was so bad. The whole point is, though, in that day, Jennifer may have lost the kickball game. But in the true sense, she won in the game of life. Now, here's my question to you. Will your child do that? If your child is so used to winning all the time, and many of your children are, and they will be, they're always used to winning. They're always used to being number 1. Would your child freely volunteer to be last? That is something to teach them because Jesus taught us. To be last is to be first. To serve is to lead. Finally, teach your children that they are each other's best friends. I know we touched on this earlier, but let me just drive it home with you. Look, folks, your children have something special called a family. Many of them are blessed by the very fact that they have siblings. From the time they are little, use these words, you 2, you 3, you 5, you 7. Someday, mom and dad may not always be with you. And maybe as moms and dads, you did not have this with your family. You didn't have this with your siblings. But you make sure that your children know from the time they're little that they are going to be each other's best friends. You just keep screwing that into their little heads. You are each other's best friends. You keep reminding them. Because not only does that build family identity, it builds family unity. Not only does it build family unity, it helps the cause of bringing a common value to the family that helps instill within children this higher sense of otherness towards their peers. There's more things that you're going to pick up in your reading. Let's go to respect for property. Respect for property, we start out with Exodus 20:15. It's really a simple commandment. Thou shalt not steal. Simply put, this verse is a commentary on private property. Obviously, the Bible supports private property. What does Exodus 20:15 include? It includes this. Do not steal someone's possessions. It also includes do not take advantage of a person's naiveness. That would be a form of stealing. We've had some great victories with our kids, but let me tell you some that are not so great. I remember when Amy, how old was she when we did that? She was only about 6 or 7, just at the point where she understood money. And she went to Jenny in front of us. And she was trying to bargain with Jenny and said, Jenny, Look what I have. I got this big nickel, and you've got just that little dime. But I'll give you the big nickel if you give me that little dime. Now, of course, Jennifer, well, bigger's better, and she handed it over to Amy, and they said, okay, it's mine now. That's what we're talking about. And, of course, we did jump right in after I asked her, how did you do that, honey? No. we jumped right in because Amy was taking advantage of Jennifer's naiveness. She didn't know. And, of course, being the firstborn, we had to explain to Amy. Amy's thing was, wait a minute, this is legally right. I gave her the options. I explained it. I said, no, honey, no. It is amazing that whether you're 6 years old or 26 years old or 46 years old, how easy it is to try to justify thievery by ignorance. What we're saying is you can't do that. There's some other illustrations. Number 3, do not steal someone else's time. You know what that means? Let me just speak to all of you. That means you need to be on time for your Growing Kids God's Way class. Because when you're not, and when everyone's got to wait, you are taking time from everyone else. Time is one of the commodities that can never be replaced. Once it's gone, you can't make it up. It's gone forever. You need to learn to respect each other's time. Maybe it's a husband's time. Maybe it's a wife's time. Maybe it's just the time for the teacher at school, whatever it may be. Maybe it's your Sunday school class time. Whatever it is, when we're ready to move, we need to be there. Certainly, you should not steal someone else's good reputation, and that's why squashing gossip the best you can, as fast as you can, and teaching your children the wickedness of slander and sin and rumor-mongering, how that is an abomination to God. You can steal someone's good reputation. The point is this. There is an ethic governing how we are to relate to honoring our neighbor's property. Now, to unwrap this ethic, we must begin with a right understanding of the object of respect. Let's look at C on your outline. The object of respect. Listen now. The object of respect, folks, is not the property itself. The object of respect is always, first and foremost, the person who owns the property. Please understand this. The object is not the property. I'm walking down the street and I've got my Wrigley's chewing gum and I just put it in my mouth, and now I have the paper and I have the foil in my hand, and I wadded it all up into a tiny, tiny little ball. You can barely see it. Now I'm walking by a beautiful manicured lawn. No, that lawn is so beautiful. Now I'm not going to throw it there. But I walk to the next house, which is for sale, and no one has mowed the lawn. You know, it's been overgrown for almost 4 weeks. The grass is high. And so it's easy, right, to just throw it in there. No one in the world will ever find that piece of paper. Now, the difference here is that I'm making a judgment based upon the object of property, and that is ethically wrong. I shouldn't throw my paper on anyone's property, because the object of respect, the object of honor, is the owner of the property. It doesn't matter if the lawn is perfectly manicured, nor does it matter if the lawn is overgrown for 4 weeks. That makes absolutely no difference, because the ethical target is the person who owns it. I want to honor that person regardless of the condition of their home. You simply can't say, well, they're not taking care of it. What difference does it make? It makes a big difference. We are not to dishonor these people. It's important that you understand that. Now, to understand the ethic of property, we need to also understand the difference between property and dominion. Let's talk about this. D on your outline. Let's define it. Property, define. Property is that which is tangible and physical and within my ownership, or within our ownership. That's property. But dominion is different. Dominion, defined, is that which I am responsible over, both in the physical and non-physical realms. It includes property, time, space, and personal rights. Dominion relates to stewardship responsibility. So we can state it this way. Dominion is the positive side of ownership, and selfishness is the negative side of ownership. Let me talk to you about the dominion sensor. We believe, ladies and gentlemen, look right up here. We believe that God put a dominion sensor right about here in all of us, right here. And that dominion sensor is very sensitive to possible encroachments or trespasses on our dominion. A little bell goes off, a little voice goes off. That dominion sensor is very sensitive to encroachment. If our dominion is threatened or trespassed upon, that sensor will notify us, and it does immediately. And this dominion factor is in children. They are born with it. You give me your little 3 or 4-year-old, and they're walking down the hallway, and it's just us, and that little 3 or 4-year-old knows Mr. Ezzo, and they've got a bag of M&Ms, okay? And as they're walking down, and I say, hey, Billy, what do you have there? And I get down, and he says, M&Ms. Billy, can I have some? He will probably take that bag of M&Ms and pour it out into my hands. At this age, children are not like adults. They don't reach in and say, well, you could have, this one fell on the floor, you could have that one. They don't do that. They just freely give. Now, take the same scenario. Child walking down the hallway, and I say, Billy, what do you got there? And he shows me, he says, give me those. Know what will happen? Instantly. The child turns and protects. Same child, same scenario. Now, why didn't he turn when I first asked for some? Because I did not threaten his dominion. But when I reached for it, he immediately turned. Does that mean the child was selfish? No. What it means is the child was protecting his dominion. We all have this dominion sensor. You know, ladies, when you're driving and you're looking for a parking spot, and now you found one. You found this person. The taillights are on. You're going to pull into where they are. They're going to back out towards you. You're patiently, this is your spot. And then you see as they're backing out, another car comes around. Now that other car sees you waiting. You even put your blinker on to make it a point, and they pull in. And you're thinking, that's not fair. That's my spot. I have been waiting. What is that? Is that your incredible selfish flesh speaking? No, that is your dominion. You see, you were next in line. That was your spot. That did belong to you. You played by the rules, and someone came in and trespassed. That's why I understand dominion is the positive side of ownership. Selfishness is the negative side of ownership. Let me go on a little further about this. The reason why God made us sensitive to our dominion is so that we would be sensitive to the dominion of others. And that's why that little voice is there. It's not simply to cause us to be sensitive to trespasses in our life, but to help us understand how easy it is to violate others. Where do you begin to train your children in how to respect the property of others? Number one, start with your children in your own homes. Start there. When our children were very young, we took very seriously the task of training them to respect the property of other people. And we did that in our home. There were certain things they could touch and certain things they couldn't touch. And we did restrain. And there were even times that we swatted their little hands. Now, certainly we wanted to have some order in our home. But please understand, many, many years ago, it was a social obligation. We all did this. Because when we took our children to your home, you would not have to worry about our children tearing up your house. Worse than that, you would not have to worry about us coming into your living room and rearranging it because of our untrained children. We did not put things away in your house. We did not, nor did we let our kids explore. We did not say when our kids, well, Mommy, can I go upstairs and see what's up there? We say, you know what? That's not a place for you to go see, and you could play down here. We didn't let that happen because you people are precious. This is your property. We wanted our children to honor you. And that was one of the reasons when we would take our children, we wanted them to learn how to honor you in your own home by respecting your property. Let me continue on. Let's talk about teaching the value of property. In order to truly understand how to respect property of another person, you first must understand the relationship between labor and value. Folks, the only benchmark measuring the value of any commodity is labor. Labor defines value. Without labor, there is no basis to establish the value of any commodity. Receiving an item without working for it may be a very wonderful thing. Your child gets a new Nintendo game, whatever the updated version may be, and you're frustrated because in 2 weeks they've stepped on it, it's broken, it doesn't work, you spent all that money, and you say, why don't my children take care of the things we give them? Well, one reason may be is because your children have no concept of the value of a dollar. And the only way they receive that is through labor. Through labor. Now, let's talk about labor. Labor can be divided into two general categories. There's duty labor and there's purchasing labor. Labor out of duty relates to an individual's responsibility to the family. For example, children doing chores. That is duty laboring. We want you to know, when our children were growing up, we never paid our children for doing chores. That was part of their family obligation. When there was work over and above, we may compensate them. When we would ask them to do something outside of the norm, that's different. But when they were growing up, when they were doing the chores, when Amy's job was to bring firewood in the winter nights, and Jennifer's job was to fill up all of the white buckets down at the barn so I could give water to the animals when I got home, we didn't pay them at the end of the week. We didn't make a tally. We fed them. We thought that was good. But we didn't pay them. And the reason we didn't pay them is because children who do chores are actually emotionally and with energy investing in the welfare of your family. Children will not walk away from their investment. As soon as you pay them on Friday, you have just cut off the relational element of their chores. Let me talk to you about the purchasing labor, because this will play into the scheme of teaching your children how to respect the property of other people. Purchasing labor is work done for financial compensation. This occurs when a child seeks extra work with the goal of purchasing something. That type of labor gives real value to money. The story that we tell over and over again, because I think it just drives it all home, is the story of Amy and Jenny way back in the late 70s came to me. And they came to both of us, and they wanted a board game. And it was really an expensive board game. I mean, back then, it was $25. It was really expensive. And I guess I imagine for some of you, that's still expensive. And, you know, we shared with the girls that that was just way out of our budget. But we had a job. I had a job that I needed to get done. I had to hire someone, so I offered it to the girls. And the job was really quite a simple job. We lived in northern New England. Anyone who's from the cold country knows that when the ground freezes and thaws in the springtime, that it doesn't matter how many rocks you take out of your garden, next year more rocks are going to appear. The frost and the thawing brings more rocks up. And so I told the girls that what I wanted them to do is very simple. Take the 5-gallon bucket, and we want you to fill it up with rocks. And then the two of you, I want you to deposit about 30 or 40 yards in our rock pile. That's all you had to do. Just pick up rocks and take them and put them over there from the garden. The girls were all excited. I'm going to give you $1 a bucket. Well, they thought this was going to be like a 2-hour job. And they got out there with that their first burst of energy. They filled up the first bucket, and they realized, two little girls, they couldn't pick up that bucket. So they had to empty some rocks. And they finally worked that bucket over, dumped it. And they went back and got the second half and dumped it. And they realized, $1. And then they went back and they did another bucket. By then it was pretty hot, so they needed a drink. Then they went back and they did it again. In 2 weeks, those girls picked up 25 buckets worth of rocks. Now, what that meant for the girls was more than just good exercise. Certainly, what was put into their mind and their thinking was the reality of what $25 meant to them. You see, their labor, their hard labor, defined for them the value of $1. The value of $1 equals one trip to the rock pile. So they knew what a $25 board game meant. In fact, they became so sensitive to what $1 was worth, they became better stewards because they were able to relate value to labor, labor to value. When they were looking for jeans and you saw that designer jean for $40, and then girls began to think, well, $40, that's a lot of money. That's 40 trips to the rock pile. All of a sudden, then the girls realized, maybe we're better off with getting 3 pairs of jeans for $15. That makes more sense. What happened with that experience of picking up all the rocks and taking them over to the rock pile? It ingrained in the minds of our children a deep understanding of the value of $1. And so they became very sensitive to your value, your property, It all made sense to them all of a sudden. In fact, when Jennifer bought her house, her and Paul bought their house out here in Southern California, and they got a very good deal. I said, Jenny, how much did you pay? She still remembers. Dad, we got it for 155,000 trips to the rock pile. She still knows that because it was impressed upon her. Teach your children to labor. If they labor, they will become better stewards of their toys, better stewards of their clothes. It's much more meaningful. You know, the other things you can do. One time I took my paycheck, we cashed it, and we put it out on the kitchen table for our children. Just laid it all out. You know, 10s, 5s, a lot of 1s. That always looks good for children. And we called the girls over. One time, called the girls over and said, girls, look, Daddy got paid. And of course, little girls, we covered the table. Now, they didn't realize the denominations 1s didn't mean as much as the 10s, and they thought, Daddy, did you rob a bank? I said, no, this is what Daddy gets paid. And they said, we got almost all the money in the world. What do you want to do with it? And of course, they're thinking, let's go to Disney World. Let's go someplace for a trip. So, well, wait a minute, before we do, what we have to do is we always take money out for the Lord. And so we took a stack out, and we said, now this belongs to God. You know we do that. So their eyes started getting a little bit smaller, but there's still a lot more money. And so we thought, well, what do you want to do now? And so their desire of going to Florida shrunk a little bit. But we said, wait a minute, before you decide, we've got to take a little bit more out because we got to pay for our mortgage. We love our house. And since we love living here and we got to pay the bank, we got to, you know what that's like. You end up taking half the table. And so now the girls are thinking, well, will we have enough for a day trip? There's not, well, wait a minute. Then we took a couple more rows out. So we got to buy food, don't we? And there's gas for the car, and then there's insurances. We got to pay insurance, and we got to pay the heating bill. And so the money's coming down. Put that over here. And then finally we got this little bit of money. And we merely pointed out, this is what the Lord has given us for the end of the week. He's given us all of this, but He's also given us this little bit of spending money. And you know, Amy, that doll that you may have wanted that cost $15, if we bought that doll, there wouldn't be much over here. We could take a dollar here for you and a dollar here for Jenny, put that aside, and in time maybe we could save. That's a visual illustration. Some of you have children who are old enough to understand that visual illustration where you divide your money up and then show them, where does it go? Where does it go? And one other thing, some people were afraid to do this in the past, but don't be afraid of this. Go ahead. Let your children know how hard you have to work for a dollar, how hard Dad and Mom works for the money. It's okay that you do that. Let them know that. In summary, just wrapping up the property section, respecting another person's property and dominion requires that training begin first with the parent. The next time there's a violation of your property, remember why God gave a dominion censor, so you will not do the same to others, and teach this to your children. Finally, we get down to respect for nature. We want you to know, and I think most of you know this, we're not into any funny movement. We're not into Save the Squid or anything like this. But we do have a very high view of nature. I'm a biker. Some of members in this audience bike with us. We have been to some of the most beautiful places on this earth, just in our backyard in Southern California. We have been where most of the population has never, and seen things most of the population has never seen. We have had mountain lions cross our trail. We have had coyotes go in front of us. We have seen some of the most beautiful orchards, some of the most beautiful country. All of that is God's gift to us. It's beautiful. You step back, you get off your bike, and you just behold the glory of God. What a terrible thing it is for us to waste our energy and our time to be caught up in the concrete jungle without bringing our children to the sensitivity and the beauty of nature. What we need to do is learn how to respect nature and teach it to our children. I am troubled when I see a child go up to an anthill that's not near the house. And, you know, they take their foot and hey, let's look at these ants. They scuff it out just for the purpose of destroying. Or the child that pulls the leaves off of a bush. Here's my question to you. Is that child your child? And number two, why? Why is your child destroying for no reason at all? What is in your child's heart? What should be in your child's heart? What should you be teaching your child? There are three reasons to respect nature. Number one, very simply, God made it. That should be enough. God made it. God called all of creation to existence by His Word. He brought man to existence by His breath, but He brought all of creation into existence by His Word. Number two, because of Genesis 1:28, man is to take dominion. That means man is to nurture. Man is to take care of. Man is to love God's big garden. We are not to abuse it. We are to take care of it. But number three, it's because of the preciousness of others. My response to nature must ethically be governed by your appreciation of nature. That is, I cannot take advantage of nature, of destroying nature, because in so doing, I am taking something from you. I don't throw my garbage on the street when I'm driving down the highway. Even if it's my biodegradable paper or if it's my banana peel, we don't throw it out. The reason we don't throw it out is not because of the sign. Now get this. You know the sign that says violators will be prosecuted if you throw trash out? That's not the reason why we don't throw trash out. It's not that fine. It's not the threat of imprisonment. That sign is there for the ungodly, the godless. That sign is there to scare the non-Christian into doing what is morally right. For the Christian, we do not throw garbage out our car windows. We respect nature because of the preciousness of the person coming behind. We do not avoid wrong out of fear of reproof. We do right out of the love of virtue. And the virtue that we're talking about, in the principle that we're talking about, is other people do count. The world is not my playground. It is something that I share with you. The beauty of God's creation is something I share with you. I need to be a steward of God's creation. You need to be a steward of God's creation. Listen, folks, you need to start early, teaching your children the sensitivity and the beauty of God's great creation. Respect for nature. Let me conclude this entire series. We've talked about respect for authority, respect for parents, respect for age, in this series, peers, property, and nature. Again, these are the 6 relationships that are natural in life. Out of the context of these 6, all character training is going to be accomplished in your children. There's a lot more that you're going to pick up in your reading, you'll pick up in doing your homework. What we're going to do now is to move into the discipline portion of our teaching. But I want you to get this. We can't talk to you about discipline without having laid down all of the foundations. If there's no moral fortitude, if there's no moral reason to train your children, then what is the moral reason to correct your children? If there's no moral target, if there's no moral purposefulness in life, if there's no understanding of honor and respect of these 6 relationships, if there's no understanding of the call of holiness that we are to define God to the world and help the world find God, then into what context does all the discipline play? That is why we've laid down for you 8 sessions of relationship building, 8 sessions of foundations. We will now turn the corner in our next session, and we'll begin the discipline process. We'll begin to introduce you to some of the tenets of biblical discipline. But most importantly, you have to understand, why will you be doing that? Is it just for your own comfort? No, there's a greater goal. It's to glorify God. Right now, let's stop right there, and let's have Anne-Marie get ready to come up, and we're going to, well, honey, I know there's plenty of things that you want to share about here, and then we're going to take your questions to wrap up this entire session. Let's do that right now. Well, Anne-Marie, we have covered quite a bit of material, or I have covered quite a bit of material. I'm anxious to get your insights on this particular session because we were talking about siblings and peers and property and certainly nature, and there's so much. Let's hear from you, hon.
There certainly is. And probably most of your thoughts, especially when it comes to siblings and peers, are probably going to be involved with that whole sharing issue and how do you get children to share. At least somewhat graciously. And I thought that might be a good place to start, is okay. Just that whole sharing issue. And again, there's those concepts in Scripture that we want to teach our children, you know, that they're to prefer one another. That starts right in the family as well, then it extends outside of the family. You know, love is not rude. Some of those basic biblical issues. But the concepts that I'm going to share about sharing obviously are not necessarily in Scripture. This just practical wisdom that you learn over the years. And understanding, too, the concept of dominion, because that does become a part of the sharing issue. God has placed, as Gary so well said, that dominion sense or that dominion issue within inside of each of us. And for those of you that have sons, you probably notice that there's an extra dose inside of your sons that's there, and God put that in there because he gave man that to have dominion. And one thing that, not from personal experience, but from friends that have raised sons, their struggle sometimes has been because their sons view mom as part of their dominion. So when dad's not there, he's going to step in. So if you're having some struggles with your sons, that's part sometimes of the issue. But because of that, the issue of the dominion and the sharing, that all plays together. And something that was helpful for us as our children were growing up is that they had some special toys. I mean, they either a special doll or books or puzzles or whatever it was, but some special things. But then collectively, we had toys that when children came in that everybody could play with. And that way we were respecting their dominion and understanding that they were to be good stewards of their toys, because there are some children that treat their toys real well, and other children, it's like a demolition team came in. So that was helpful in helping the children learn how to share. We had a special box downstairs that these were everybody's toys, and their very special toys were up in their room that as they had friends that they could trust, they were allowed to share those toys with them. I think another helpful tool is as your children grow, and so you start from really your little toddlers, and they begin to reach out and touch items that are off limits, that you just begin to identify them. You know, let's just say there's some books out. No, those are Daddy's books. Now, where are Amy's books? And so you're identifying that people in the house all own different parts of property. And that kind of really, you know, I'm thinking, reflecting back on our children, and even with the grandchildren, with Braden's not talking yet, but the other 5, we've never really had a major problem with the mine and that real selfish type of an attitude, but that's been something that's been cultivated in our home and in our daughters' homes with the kids. And our example, you know, we have to keep going back to our example. Do they see a mom and dad that shares and are not selfish and hoarding with their things? And not only when we share, but if we borrow from somebody else, do they see that we make sure that we give it back in the same condition that it was borrowed in, or better? I think another helpful thing, too, is your children grow, and the more that you have, that don't ever assume that they can just take something from their sibling, but they request and ask permission, and that's a matter of respect.
Let's talk about value substitution. We did talk about that earlier, but we want to go back to our clip that we showed you at the top of this session, and let's find out what's going to happen with that shopping cart that is headed towards the car. So let's watch that clip right now again. Whoa. We use this particular illustration because I think it really drives home the idea of taking care of other people's property and respecting it, even if it's the property of the store owner. You know, moms, dads, when you fill up your grocery cart, when you take it out to the car, we really want to suggest that you think of the preciousness of others, the people coming behind you, the people who have their cars parked next to you. Unload your groceries and take, when it's possible, because some of you have little ones, take that cart back to its appropriate place, maybe in front of the store or maybe in one of the racks. The reason we do that, you've all been there before. You know, moms, you were driving around and you're trying to find a spot to park your car. Oh, there's one over there. You pull around and there's 3 shopping carts right there. And you know how frustrated you are? You know how sometimes you just feel violated? You start to think, who would do that? And then you remember, oh, that's mine from yesterday. You know? Take your shopping carts back. Why? Well, because that is just one way that we're going to show the world that we are different. Why do you do that, Mommy, when your kids ask? Well, honey, this is just a way of honoring other people. The cart belongs to the store, and the store provides the carts so that everyone can use them. Take your shopping carts back. What else on that, honey? Anything else on that?
Well, not so much the shopping cart, but I was just thinking even, because we talked about respecting for nature too, and God really doesn't leave anything unsaid. And in my study of Proverbs, in chapter 12, the first part of verse 10, it says, "A righteous man regards the life of his animal." And when I read that, I thought, it's respect for nature.
That's exactly
you know, that God deals with everything.
Well, you know what it is? Actually, the ultimate is it's respect for God. When you respect His creation, in fact, you are placing honor on God. That's why we are to do it. And we do it, again, so that we can define God to the world, to help the world find God. Okay? Anything more?
No.
Okay, folks, we're going to go to questions now. We're going to take them from you. We'll have I'm sure we have a number of questions. Raise your hand. Where are we going to begin? Janine, right here.
My question has to do with my oldest and my youngest daughter. My youngest is 3, and she got a hold of my oldest coloring book and accidentally ripped several pages of it. My oldest was crushed, so we taped it back together. My youngest said sorry, but my oldest is feeling the sense of injustice and she's learning about restitution. How do we, or is my 3-year-old capable of doing anything further
To fix it.
to fix it?
Okay. Well, first of all, your youngest is probably not capable of completely understanding the concept of restitution. You know, in these cases, what moms and dads should do is just go out and, on behalf of the younger child, buy the older child another coloring book. Or if it was a special gift, let's say from grandma, just get permission from grandma to say, this is the coloring book that grandma wants you to have, and it's a brand new coloring book. And we are teaching your sister how to be careful with your property, but we want you to have a new one. And someday, as you both grow up, you will learn how to take care of each other's books and coloring books and whatever other toys that you may have. So I think that's the place you want to start. Just mom and dad should go out. Do you agree with that? I hope you agree with that.
Well, I do, but if I could add just
Sure.
2 other things, because in listening to the scenario and thinking too on the lesson of repentance and forgiveness, because there was, even though the child is only 3, there still was some intent in ripping that, and so just an "I'm sorry," that could even be part of the struggle that the 5-year-old is sensing, because 5-and-a-half-year-old is sensing. So even going back and asking for forgiveness for not having self-control in ripping the book.
Right.
And then there could be maybe a nice gesture that the 3-year-old could do for the older sister. It's not restitution for the coloring book, but it's doing something kind to her sister.
Now, down the road, another 4 or 5 weeks, we are going to actually teach the doctrine of repentance, restoration, how to rightly seek forgiveness. What you're actually saying, honey, just a preview, is instead of having your child say, "I'm sorry," what you're saying is actually have your child say to the older sister, "Sister, will you forgive me?" Because that is a way of closing it off. But we don't want to give them too much of what's coming in the future. But that is something you can start working on right now. Okay, let's continue on. Who has the next question? Okay, let's just continue on right over to Sean.
Yeah, hi, Gary. Our family's growing, and as it is growing, our children would like to have pets. And so my wife and I, also loving God's creation as our children do, we purchase some different types of pets, and eventually I become the chief caregiver of those pets. And I don't mind it. I love God's creatures, but I'm kind of concerned that maybe we need to evaluate, and if you'd help me, evaluate when it's appropriate for families to start purchasing pets, and how does that affect a child's responsibility to ensure that they're being properly cared for?
And it's a great question. First of all, every family is going to be different, Sean. And there's going to be a different level of interest in taking care of the family pet. And of course, family pets vary. There's not a whole lot of caretaking going on with the goldfish, but there's a lot of caretaking that has to go on with the dog. The same thing is true with children who have different ages. Each child may want their own pet, or maybe we just decide as a family we're only going to have one pet. But I think that you really hit a nerve when you said, and in time, I'm the one who ends up taking care of the animal. I think that that's a clue that before you venture off as a family, with your children, and they're really pushing, Daddy, can we get a puppy or can we get a kitty, that you're going to have to stress responsibility. Even if that means both Mom and Dad have to make up a work chart of who's responsible for this cat this week or who's responsible for feeding the dog. So those are some things. But at the same time, you've got to be able to give your children the freedom to fail in this, as we talked about in the Father's Mandate, because in fact there's going to be times we all lose interest. And until the pet's gone, then all of a sudden we want another pet, or we remember how much we loved Mittens and we would have taken care of him if we just knew there was a real need. Give your children the freedom to fail. Remember, as they are growing, they do become more responsible. Anything more on that, hon?
I just am thinking back to, in another way, sometimes you can test it. The girls wanted a horse. This is when we lived back in New Hampshire, and our neighbor up the street had one, so we said, okay, you go help our neighbor for 30 days. Go up and clean their barn, go up before you go to school and shovel it out and feed them when you get home from school for nothing. This was just so that they could understand the concept about it. And they both thought about it for a bit, and they thought, maybe we really don't want a horse.
Can we have a cat?
You know.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's a matter of helping them to realize all that's involved.
Exactly. Let's continue on. I think we're going to move across. Who's got some questions over here? Questions? Clay?
Hey, Gary, I'd like to go back to an issue we were talking about earlier on the shopping carts. And, well, what about the economic issues? I mean, aren't we eliminating some jobs by not having some people out there moving the shopping carts around? What's up with that?
No, we're not. I don't think we're eliminating any jobs. See, the issue isn't eliminating jobs. The issue is a courtesy issue. I know that people ask us, well, the stores hire people to take those carts back. You've missed the point. The issue is not someone taking the cart back. The issue, if you leave your cart, how will you guarantee that your cart is not going to smash into someone else's car? I mean, if you're willing to stand there until someone comes and takes it back, that's fine. But that's not the point. The point is understanding the preciousness of others. It's a little thing. But let's face it, we live in a society that really is getting very lazy. We are so service-oriented that we want everyone else, want the rest of the world to serve us. And it's I just think it's very demeaning to the Christian witness for us to require others to come and really be our servants in these trivial ways when, in fact, just take your cart back. I mean, that's just do it. And you're going to feel good. When you do it, Clay, God's hand is going to come down and just pat you on the back and say, good man, Clay, you've done that which is right. You have not done mediocrity. You've done that which is the higher standard. So take your carts back and do not worry. You're not going to take someone's job from them by doing it. Okay. Good question. Good question. Who else? Who's got another? Oh, we got two. Let's go right behind you. Leslie, let's take your question, and then we'll come over to Tony.
My question, Gary, is regarding sibling relationships. I have a 5-year-old son and a 1.5-year-old daughter, and he has a tendency to give instructions to my daughter. And as a parent, practically speaking, how can I help him to strike a balance between not being bossy but encouraging her to righteousness? Because a lot of times what he's telling her is a good thing, but I see him becoming bossy and feeling like he's the parent.
Well, you know, what is interesting is usually that is the role of the oldest female, that she assumes the secondary mother position, and if she's the firstborn, of course, she will assume that there's 3 of us and there's these other kids, so Mom, Dad, what do you want me to do with them? But you can have that, honey, with an older son. Obviously, Leslie has it. So where do we begin? I mean, yes, you want to encourage to that which is right, but I guess you don't want the child to get into the habit of thinking that, you know, he is the third parent.
And part of it is to listen to their tone of voice and the attitude that they're speaking to the sibling. And if it's one of encouragement, and you can tell it's just like, come on, Mommy's calling you, you know, and there's a gentleness and a provoking that way. But it's like, you know, hey, Mom's calling you, let's get, you can just tell by the attitude or that bossiness that's there. And so, and it is a fine line, and based on his age of 5, he's just beginning to understand some of that.
That's right. And plus, boys love the dominion portion of taking control and directing this young lady to what she should be doing. So it's balanced, but just being aware of it, Leslie, knowing that, okay, this may be something you have to monitor, and it may be something that you may say, you know what, right now, if there's a problem, I want you to come to Mommy. And we're going to take just maybe a little season in which Mommy will direct your sister, not you. But if you see a problem, you come to Mommy. On the other hand, you got to avoid the tattletaling, but we'll get to tattletaling when we get to discipline issues.
Right.
Okay. Let's move on. Tony, you have the last question of the session.
Thank you. I have two questions. My first question has to deal with allowances. I noticed you didn't mention anything about allowances in your presentation. I was wondering if you could share your view on allowances with our children. And my second question has to do with teaching labor and teaching value derived from labor. Since we live in the city, we're wondering if you might have some ideas that you can give us in dealing with that whole issue when we, just have a little small square
You don't have
in a
rocks
busy
in the
neighborhood.
Pile, huh?
We don't have any rock piles, exactly.
Okay. Well, let's take care of the allowances first. Basically, our view on allowances is that parents, you got to be very careful. If you're going to give your children money at the end of the week simply because they're in your family, I really believe that you are robbing your children of that sense of investment, emotional investment, physical investment into taking care of the family. There is something to be said about a child who gives to the family through their chores. And that doesn't mean we didn't give them money. There were times when I just gave the kids money because I wanted to be a great dad in that moment. But what we did not do and what we are not advocates of is just giving children money for the sake of giving them money. Now, some will say, well, I'm giving my children allowances because I want them to become good stewards of their finances. Again, we will tell you, if you want your children to be a good steward of finances, there's one sure way that you're going to get that message across. Teach them labor. Now, that leads into then the second part of your question. What are we going to do in the city? Well, Tony, you own a car, right? Yeah. Mom owns a house. You got windows on your home. You got floors to be cleaned. I would say there were times when I didn't need rocks picked from the garden. But I did say to the girls, if you would wash the car, and that's worth like $3 to me outside really well. If you clean the windows on the inside, that special spray that you kids love pumping and putting up there, you clean the windows on the inside, that's worth another $1. If you can get the vacuum cleaner out and you vacuum the whole thing out, that's worth another $2. Now, I'm going to give that job to you. You kids can do it. If not, I'll do it. That was a way for them to earn money. Again, we wanted them to earn money, and we made it always very attractive to them, especially if they wanted something. Again, it's not that we never bought our kids Christmas gifts, surprise gifts. It's not that we withheld any type of financial support for them. But we tried to balance what they wanted with some of the greater needs, learning to become a good steward by learning how to labor. So please, we live in a consumer-oriented society. We're out buying our kids so many things. Just moms and dads, be careful. We used to say, you want to let your kids have fun? Go out and buy yourselves a beautiful refrigerator. You enjoy that. And then take that refrigerator box and give it to your kids. Do you know what that box will become? That box has that's going to become a pirate ship. That box is going to become a spaceship. That box is going to become a stage that they're going to be riding through the Wild West. If you buy them something like that, or just give them something like that, that releases their imagination. We are so caught up with buying these kids their educational games, and that's not to say that there's not a place for it, but we're not releasing their imagination. When they have nothing, that is when creativity begins. Okay? This has been a long lesson. Thank you all for your great questions. Where do we go from here next week?
We start, what is obedience, the standard, and move into the discipline section.
Very good. So let's have some fellowship, let's have some dessert, and we'll gather back next week.